Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the channel. I'm Recurs. So a couple weeks ago I did a video talking about Medal of Honor and how EA could really bring it back. Now, a couple things have happened since that video. First of all, I went back and looked at that video and I thought it sounded like it was all over the place. There was no real structure or theme to it whatsoever. It was pretty much me winging it, and that's something that I really don't like when I do, because it really does make the video feel unorganic and it really feels really confusing and really just doesn't flow as well. So having sat back and waited for a while, I decided, you know what, I'm going to remake this video, but I'm going to do it in a lot more of a better structure, if that makes sense. Also with the knowledge of the current things that we now know that have come out in the last couple of weeks about the future of EA's FPS labour rate and what they are going to do, so let's get right into it. So when it comes to EA's FPS games, we pretty much have to talk about a lot of things. The first one is of course Battlefield, because Battlefield will really influence a lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this, and I really have to talk about Battlefield because, like I say, the developers and everything that's going on at EA, Battlefield's their big FPS game, so I have to talk about that for a brief second before I can jump into Medal of Honor, okay? But first of all, let's start off like this. EA really screwed up with Battlefield 2042, and in all honesty, they repeated a lot of the same mistakes that they made with Medal of Honor Warfighter, yet for some reason they chose to keep supporting 2042. I don't know if it was because of the sales, maybe the sales were better than Warfighter. Whereas with Medal of Honor Warfighter, pretty much just threw it in the bin and left it to die eventually. I know a lot of people will look at Medal of Honor Above and Beyond and say, well, you know what, it did get a bit of a revive, but honestly I don't really see Above and Beyond as being a big Medal of Honor revive, mainly because, like I say, the developers and so forth only chose to release that game on one platform, the VR Oculus Rift. Sorry about that. So for the most part, I don't really see it as a big new release. I see new releases as big revivals in terms of games if it's on multi-platform, so PC and console. If it got a release like that, I'd see it as a big revival, but it didn't. So recently, an article was actually released by Tom Henderson, and within this article it pretty much stated that DICE and EA are actually developing the early stages for Battlefield 2023. Obviously the working title is to be revealed, but for the most part it pretty much greenlights that EA is still planning on releasing a Battlefield game in 2023. So despite 2042's abysmal performance in terms of player base and sales, because EA did say the sales were disappointing, Battlefield as a franchise is still going to be making games in 2 years time, well actually a year's time now, so this time next year we'll more than likely have a lot of leaks surrounding what the game will be, but we're in the early stages at this point. So how does this actually affect Medal of Honor? Well, it affects it quite a bit, because if you guys recently remember, EA confirmed that DICE LA, who before they were DICE LA was Danger Close Games, before they were that they were EA Los Angeles, and then before they were EA Los Angeles they were DreamWorks Interactive. That was the base studio who pretty much worked on every single Medal of Honor game bar Allied Assault. Allied Assault was actually developed by a company called 2015 Inc., who is no longer a company. Now one of the founding members of 2015 Inc. who worked on Allied Assault is actually with EA currently. This guy, as we all know, is Vince Zampella. Now for anyone who actually isn't aware of what he's currently doing at the minute, currently he's overseeing the Battlefield franchise, so he is, along with Marcus Leto. The only difference is that Marcus Leto, who's usually very active on Twitter, actually put up a couple of days ago that he was in Stockholm meeting with DICE to discuss the future plans for the franchise. Vince Zampella is actually taking more of a backseat in this approach. Now, a reason I bring him up, again, obviously, first of all, I have to talk about it because he is part of Battlefield, he's overseeing the Battlefield franchise, but he's also helming two other studios, as we all know. He's also head of Respawn Entertainment, who makes Titanfall games and currently working on Apex Legends. But what else he is overseeing is actually the development of Ripple Effect Studios' own IP. Well, they say it's an own IP, but their own game, we'll call it at this point. Now, on the 8th of July 2021, EA actually confirmed that the company themselves had changed their name to Ripple Effect Studios, and work had began on their own IP. So 2021, which will then mean by the time October 2022 comes out, which is usually a calendar year when EA wants to release their FPS titles. We've seen it in the past with Medal of Honor, we've seen it in the past with Battlefield, and even as far as I do believe Titanfall released, and correct me if I'm wrong, Titanfall 2 this is, released in October of 2016 maybe, I'm not sure. I do remember it was sandwiched right between Battlefield 1 and Infinite Warfare, which didn't help the game, so I'm assuming it was around the October time. I'll have to do a bit more research into that myself, but for the most part, let's just say it was around that sort of October, sort of November time scale, which will mean by the time that EA is expecting a new FPS game to come out, it'll pretty much have been 2 years since that article was actually released, which confirmed DICE LA had changed their name to Ripple Effect and the new game was being worked on. Now, the videos I've made in the past about this sort of topic have pretty much covered a lot of the same stuff. So I have the stuff that's included, in the videos has been the articles that have suggested, the theme of the game, the engine the game could be using. For instance, there's actually been 2 articles which have stated that the first game Ripple Effect could be making is a military themed game. Okay, so that's a checkpoint. The second point is that it will be run on the Frostbite engine. Well, the Frostbite engine is coincide with EA. All their games run on the Frostbite engine, so that's really no given article whatsoever. There's no real source there to say, well, it's definitely going to be a Medal of Honor game or a Battlefield game because it's using Frostbite. all EA games run on the Frostbite engine, so it's nothing new. So it doesn't, to be honest, it's no big surprise. However, the article that I saw that said that the first game could be military themed really made me interested, because first of all, what do we know about the company? Like I said, well, we know that they're not going to be making a standalone Battlefield game, so that's pretty much been confirmed with the news that DICE are actually making the 2023 game. A lot of people actually thought Ripple Effect would be making the new game, since DICE in 2042 got a lot of backlash with that from the community. A lot of people weren't happy with pretty much what they did with that game, and the game itself just didn't hold up to the standards people expect the Battlefield game to be. So a lot of people thought the Ripple Effect's new game would be a standalone Battlefield game, or even a spin-off like, say, maybe Bad Company. However, no new news just came out from that. We don't even have a clue really what the Ripple Effect Studios game is. The only reason I'm suggesting Medal of Honor is mainly because there's a lot of core Medal of Honor in the DNA of Ripple Effect by both the president, we'll say at this point, of Ripple Effect, Vince Zampella, and the studio itself has a lot of people who worked on the previous Medal of Honor games. So Medal of Honor really is tied into Ripple Effect if you look at the DNA of the studio. So the only real work they did on Battlefield games was a support studio in terms of DLC. They didn't actually make any base games for Battlefield in that aspects of it, and they just pretty much worked on helping the game make, look a bit tidier. For instance, Battlefield Hardline, we know that was Visceral Games who developed that game. Well, DICE LA, even though it says DICE on the cover, that's actually DICE LA. They were the ones who pretty much went in, helped tidy the game up, made it look presentable effectively, and pretty much saved the games. They really did save Battlefield 4, if you guys remember the mess that game launched in. But anyway, I'm getting a bit sidetracked here. Like I said a bit earlier, Marcus Leto was actually in Stockholm speaking to the developers of 2042 and actually talking to DICE themselves. Now, we don't know what was included in that meeting whatsoever. However, one thing that's interesting to note is that EA are actually going to be creating a studio that he's going to be running, and I can't even remember where it is, so I'm just going to ignore where it's supposed to be, but they're actually releasing a new studio, so they are, and he's going to be president of it, which will also focus on the Battlefield games so well. So that means that EA will have 3 studios working on Battlefield games going forward. Now, a difference between Battlefield and Call of Duty is Call of Duty on average releases an annual game every year, so realistically it's a 3-year cycle for developers to release a new game yearly, so it is. So what that means is that EA, if they were going to make all 3 of these studios do Battlefield games, that means DICE Battlefield game will come out in, let's just say, for instance, 2024, okay? Or 23 at this point, we'll say 2023. That would mean Ripple Effects would release in 2025, and Marcus Leto's studio would release theirs in 2027, and then the next DICE game would release in 2029. So already there's 6 years between games there, so there is. So if we get an exciting game, let's say, for instance, of the level of Battlefield 3, if this structure had been in place during the time of Battlefield 3, that would have meant we would have had to wait 6 years for Battlefield 4 effectively, and I don't think EA really wants to deal with their studios. I do believe that Marcus Leto's studio will in fact be another support studio supporting DICE and actually working very closely to DICE, but I also believe that Ripple Effect are working on a different game entirely, the Battlefield. Now, one of the things that I feel the need to mention here is this. A lot of people will probably say to me, well, it could be a Titanfall game, Vince Zampella, Respawn, he worked with Demons, and now he's working with Ripple Effect on an FPS game. It could be a Titanfall game, and to be fair, that isn't actually a bad shout at all, because Titanfall 3 is really in demand amongst a lot of fans. The only reason I would say I don't believe it's going to be a Titanfall game is mainly because Apex Legends is doing so well, and that's set in the Titanfall universe. It's somewhat of a Titanfall spin-off, and Respawn has got their hands full doing that. Also, Respawn is currently doing a Star Wars game, and also another team at Respawn. Respawn have a big studio. The team that recently did the VR Medal of Honor Above Beyond, they're handling a Star Wars FPS game. So what we've pretty much ticked off there is we've ticked off DICE is doing another Battlefield game, Respawn is doing another Star Wars FPS game, as well as Jedi Fallen Order 2. So there's 2 FPS games straight away that we can tick off. EA really don't have a lot in their catalogue in terms of FPS games, other than maybe Titanfall, but again, we just don't see Titanfall happening by another studio. If anything, it'll happen solely by Respawn at some point. And another reason I bring that up is pretty much because Titanfall doesn't run on the Frostbite engine. We'll confirm that, and the fact that it's a futuristic base setting game, I don't think that you would need to throw out an article saying that you want someone who has a knowledge of military equipment. So if you're talking about military equipment, that springs to mind when it comes to me, maybe a modern day setting or a past setting sort of experienced person on a war basis, if that makes a bit of sense. So I don't think it's Titanfall. So the only real option I could see it being is Medal of Honor, because realistically EA again have 4 big major FPS games, if you want to call them major FPS games. Battlefield, which is being handled, Titanfall, which is being handled, Star Wars, which is being handled, Medal of Honor, which is pretty much open. Again, another reason I say this is because it just makes a lot of sense if you ask me. I know it made no sense in saying what I said there, but it just does make a lot of sense if you ask me. And don't get me wrong, I am fully open to the fact that people will probably throw at me, well, Respawn, they did the recent Medal of Honor VR game, which was exclusive to Oculus. I get that, but here's the situation with Medal of Honor when it comes to exclusives. Medal of Honor in the past has flip-flopped between developers. It's went for exclusive releases, it's also went for wide releases. For instance, Allied Assault was a PC exclusive, Pacific Assault, PC exclusive, Medal of Honor Heroes, PSP exclusive, Medal of Honor Heroes 2 exclusives to both the Wii and the PSP. So Medal of Honor having an exclusive game isn't anything new, so it isn't. Also, I have to state this because I think it's actually a very valid point. If EA wanted to make as much money off that VR thing that they really wanted, they could have thrown Battlefield onto it, so it could have been Battlefield Above and Beyond, which is no connection whatsoever to what DICE is doing. Because Battlefield, despite me preferring Medal of Honor because it's a much more close quarter, smaller game, Battlefield's a bigger game in terms of brand recognition and sales. Battlefield will sell more, so if they had strapped Battlefield Above and Beyond instead of Medal of Honor, it would have made a lot more sense because it would have sold more. I think strategically they've brought them the Medal of Honor into the fold to try and get, a bit of brand recognition going again. People thinking, oh shit, Medal of Honor, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I remember Medal of Honor, it's a big game. I think they've done that strategically to try and get people excited for Medal of Honor again, sort of get people talking about the franchise as a whole again. Because up until Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, it had actually been 8 years since Medal of Honor Warfighter, which, despite me liking the game and a lot of other people liking the game, I really think EA just wants to sort of take that out of people's minds when they talk about Medal of Honor. So on EA, their side of things, sorry I muttered my words, but their attitude would be, well, hey, do you guys remember Medal of Honor? Yeah, we're bringing it back. The last game, Medal of Honor Above and Beyond, it won an Oscar. So it really does help to have the games have a positive feedback. And I know Above and Beyond was a bit of a mixed reception amongst fans, but for the most part, like I say, it won an Oscar. It's the only game in the history of the gaming industry to win an Academy Award. Now, I know it wasn't necessarily for the gameplay, it was for an in-game story, but for the most part, it still did achieve more than any other game has done at the Academy Awards. So when you say Medal of Honor, the recent game in the Medal of Honor franchise won an Academy Award, it does really paint a nice picture for the franchise, so it does. Now I've rumbled on for a bit. I'm going to do a follow-up video to this in a couple weeks, stating what I think the next Medal of Honor game should be if they are going to do a new one. The ideas I would suggest out for what. Now they're obviously not going to listen to me because, like I say, who am I in the gaming industry? But it'd be nice to sort of express my ideas and, thoughts of what I think they should do. But this has just been my own opinion on why I think Medal of Honor could be releasing a new game in 2024. Now, the reason I say 2024 is mainly because if it was going to be 2022, we would have heard of something by now. Also, I think with the recent backlash that Battlefield 2042 has, it really, really did change the plans initially. So overall, I do think, if anything, we're getting a game in 2024, because obviously now we know Battlefield's going to be released in 2023. So around 2024, if we look at it on that scale, it would have meant it would have been 12 years since the last big scale Medal of Honor release. Enough time for everyone to sort of forget about Warfighter, but a recent enough time that people go, well, the last Medal of Honor game won awards. So yeah. Over that, I've been encouraged. If you agree with any of my opinions I've stated here, please feel free to comment below, leave a like maybe. Also, if you disagree, again, talk about it, tell me why you disagree, what you think Ripple Effect could be doing. Also, I'll leave links to the articles in the description below, mainly because it would just take too long for me to throw them up on the screen, plus it disrupts the video and the gameplay in the background. I suppose you can make that argument maybe. But yeah, I've been encouraging you. Thanks for checking out the video, guys. Peace.